how long are you going to be talking? That little kid, you be talking long? I said, I promise you I'll be pretty fast. So my talk is on the Antediluvian period. I know you've heard of it. Has anybody else ever heard of this phrase before?
I've heard it, but I don't know.
Okay, a few people. Okay, actually, this phrase was coined by Sir Thomas Browne in the 1600s. He was an English polymath. I had to look that up. Physician and author, he explored fields spanning science, medicine, and religion. Now I'll tell you what polymath. I asked my wife what she said. I don't know anything about math. I said, I thought that too, but that's not what it means. Polymath is an individual whose expertise and knowledge spans a significant variety of different subject areas. True polymaths achieve deep, meaningful mastery across diverse, often unrelated disciplines. So this guy, he coined this phrase. And so, according to biblical genealogies, this period lasted 1,656 years from creation until the flood. From Adam through the 10 generations listed in Genesis 5, if you take them and you add them up, you're going to get 1,656 years. And it ends with Noah. And during this time, you had long lifespans were the norm, because you had Methuselah reaching 969 years. So we're going to talk about how things looked during this time, because when you leave here and you go drive home, that is not what existed before the flood. The flood changed everything. The flood changed the atmospheric conditions, the topography, everything, the mountains, everything that you see is a result of after the flood. But we're going to talk about the conditions that existed pre-flood. So here we have in Genesis 1:1 to 1:31, that's the Genesis where God spoke, created every day, and then it ended on the sixth day when he made Adam. And then in Genesis chapter 7, verse 11, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the second month, it says the same day were all the fountains of the deep open in the windows of heaven. So now we have the entire span of what is coined the Antediluvian period. Because when God made everything, it was perfect. There was no curse. There was nothing. It was perfect. And so we're going to look at some of the conditions that a lot of this is theory, but the fossil record is going to bring a lot of this information out. And just really, I had a lot of fun doing this. So you have a proposed pre-flood atmospheric model. You have a vapor canopy model. This hypothesis suggests a vast blanket of invisible water vapor, the waters above the firmament, existed in the upper atmosphere, creating a greenhouse effect. And you saw that in scriptures where the windows of heaven opened. They believe that was the water canopy. Then you have a hyperbaric and oxygen-rich condition. Some groups propose that the pre-flood atmosphere had higher atmospheric pressure and increased oxygen levels. Proponents argue this allowed for the large size and the longevity attributed to organisms in the Antediluvian record. And you'll see some of these in the fossil record. It's quite shocking, really. And then you had a stable hydrological system. Instead of global rainfall, Genesis chapter 2, 5 through 6 indicates that the ground was watered by artesian springs and mist or dews. This implies a different atmospheric cycle without large-scale wind or cloud formations. And I don't believe tornadoes, hurricanes, any of these things existed prior to, because it didn't have the same atmospheric conditions that we have. It was totally different environment. According to Dr. Carl Ball, and this is the guy pictured at the bottom. Let me tell you a little about him, then I'll finish this. Dr. Carl Ball is founder and director of the Creation Evidence Museum in Glen Rose, Texas. He is the scientific research director of the world's first hyperbaric biosphere simulating Earth's atmospheric conditions before the worldwide flood of Noah's days. So he has done all this research, and he's trying to create the same conditions that he believed existed. So according to Dr. Carl Bogg, a pre-flood water canopy created double the atmospheric pressure we have today. It blocked UV radiation completely. The percent of oxygen in the atmosphere was greater than today. At that time, it's 35%. Today, we have 21%. They had 35%. Breathing pure oxygen gives a person more energy. The pre-flood electromagnetic field around the Earth was much greater than today, and we'll see the charts where it's actually lessened. And that keeps all the bad stuff from coming in. The Earth's magnetic strength has declined 10% in the last 150 years, according to Astronomy and the Bible, D. Young, page 18, and 40% of its strength in the last 1,000 years. Earth's magnetic field is therefore getting weaker, allowing more radiation to get through. And that's why you age a lot more quicker, because the harmful rays is getting in versus before they were bouncing off of what God put in on us. In Carl Bogg's model, 5 Gauss, that's just the intensity of the electromagnetic field. Pulse electromagnetic energy were used as opposed to less than today. This resulted in larger living creatures and long life period. Now let me say this, the water canopy theory gained a lot of ground early in the 70s and 80s and such. Some disagree with that because they believe the water canopy would not create a greenhouse effect, but more like along the lines of a sauna, and it would be too hard for anything to live. But then they don't, at the same time, they can't tell you where all the water from when the windows of heaven open, where's all that water coming from? They only say we don't believe it could have happened. But if you'll see from the fossil record that the conditions were there, whatever they think may exist, for these creatures to get really, really big. So here you have, starting at creation, where the electromagnetic field, and you see in the top corner, started to decay. Now, if you look at where the flood happened, it went up and down because of what was going on here. And then it fluctuated right after the flood, and then it stabilized out, and now it started to decay to present day. Does everybody see that? So creation of the magnetic field along with the Earth, steady decay for nearly 2,000 years into the flood. Large fluctuations continued for up to 2,000 years after the flood, and then we've had steady decay ever since. Now this is the model of what we think the pre-flood conditions look like. Yeah. On the pre-flood here, if you see the water canopy right here, that's where they believe the greenhouse effect took place. The atmospheric pressure and the gas and everything pressurized the conditions, and so it forced oxygen into your lungs. And so here you had the ozone was really thick, and so all the short waves and even the long waves got filtered to some degree before it hit the earth. But after the flood, you see the water canopy was gone, and then the ozone is now thinner, and then it's not stopping the UV radiation from hitting the earth, and you no longer have the atmospheric pressure that you would existed here. Now this is all theory. Yes.
Once you ascend to a certain altitude, did your research ever go over when water reaches that superstate, when it exists in all three states?
Well, you know, right now they said there's enough atmospheric water right now. If it came down, would be a 1 inch deep all over the world. That's how much water is in the atmosphere right now. Would reach 1 inch. So there's still a large amount of water in your atmosphere. And this is another good one where the water canopy, and you have the radio waves. If you know anything about the stars and the planets, they emit a radio wave, a pulsar wave. I heard a guy was talking years ago, and he said it's believed that when Adam and Eve woke up and the stars come out, there was music. Because all the stars have a frequency, the sun has a frequency, everything has a frequency, and they could hear the orchestra. I don't know if you've been on some sites where they've actually put together all in the heavens, put it together, and it sounds like an orchestra. And I think that's fantastic. And they also believe, because of the way God designed it, they could see the colors of the stars. And when I go outside and look at stars, I see all white, unless you have a telescope. But there you got blue stars, yellow stars, red ones, all colors. And they believe, because of the way God designed it, that when they woke up and saw the stars, they could see the colors. And they could see the colors. Now, I can imagine going outside and seeing the beautiful colors, but I think that's a beautiful thought to have myself. But here you have the way it was set up, where it would stop the harmful UV radiation blocked. Now, Karl Bog's not the first one who thought of the water canopy. Actually, Jerome, who actually was the chief translator of the Latin Vulgate, he actually used Ezekiel chapter 1, verses 22, 23, and 25, and 26 to come up with his own thought process. Since I can't read Latin, I'm going to read the English. Does anybody want to read the Latin? I'll go for it.
No, I gave up Latin.
She raised her hand. Did you raise your hand?
No, I gave up Latin in high school.
Okay, this is what he said. Between heaven and earth, a firmament is built in the middle, and according to the etymology of the Hebrew language, heaven, that is, Samayim, is derived from the waters, and the waters which are above the heavens are separated into for praises of God. Hence also in the prophet Ezekiel, crystal is seen stretched out above the cherubim, Ezekiel chapter 1, that is compact and denser water. That was his interpretation of that scripture. Here's another guy, Isaac Newton Vail. He also believed not in a water canopy, but in rings like Saturn had. He believed we had a water icy series of rings that degenerated and collapsed over time. That was his. Thus Vail believed that the earth had possessed a Saturn-like ring system which degenerated into a series of world-embracing vapor canopies, which then collapsed via a succession of catastrophic snowfalls in the polar regions. That's what his theory was. Now, if you ever seen the Genesis flood book printed in the early 60s and 70s from John C. Whitcomb and Dr. Henry Morris, they have a lot. If you guys, they actually have a website, creation research site. But here's what he said in his book, in the blue: the waters above the firmament seem to imply more than our present clouds and atmospheric water vapor, especially since Genesis 2:5 implies that during this time rainfall was not experienced on the earth. The upper waters did not, however, obscure the light from the heavenly bodies, and so must have been in the form of invisible water vapor. Such a vast expanse of water vapor would necessarily have had a profound effect on terrestrial climates and therefore on geological activity. So he went great in depth in the Genesis flood conditions. But I will say that if you want to look at some information on the flood itself, I'd go to Walt Brown. He has a hydroplate theory. It's really interesting, and he talks about the continents. When the fountains of the deep came up, the erosion was causing the plates to split at 60 miles an hour. It was just, it's very interesting, very interesting. Walt Brown. Because I love something. When I read scripture, I believe it's true.
Me too.
I believe when God says this, it is. And then we have a lot of people who don't believe that God made everything in 6 days. They said, I don't see how it's possible. But our God can. The God of evolution cannot. So the key features of the pre-flood atmosphere according to creation theories. The water vapor canopy is a layer of water vapor in the upper atmosphere, is a central feature of many pre-flood models. In the early time, in the 60s, 70s, they were everywhere. And then I talked about the greenhouse effect. This canopy would have trapped heat, creating a uniform, warmer global temperature of approximately around 55 degrees at night to 77. That's just a rough guess, but that sounds pretty good to me. 55 at night, 70 something during the day, versus the 90 to 100 that we have. And then you had the higher pressure. The additional atmospheric gas from the canopy would have increased air pressure. That would have caused the oxygen to go into your bodies. And I'm going to show you an example in a minute. Higher oxygen levels. Some theories suggest higher pressure could have led to a higher concentration of oxygen, which some believe may explain the longevity of life and the larger size of some prehistoric creatures. And then you have the stable environment, like I said. The conditions are thought to have created a very calm and stable atmosphere. I'm not sure the correct wouldn't be no clouds, because if the sun was evaporating water on the seas, you could have cloud contact for me. But you would have a stable climate. You would not have the climate that you see today, that it's 105 degrees in Sahara, and it's 35 below zero in Alaska. It was pretty well consistent. I think that's wonderful. And actually, Rabbi and I was talking about this, because this is what is a tree sap, or it's hardened amber. It's where the tree sap comes down and it hardens, but it catches pockets. So you see all these pockets. The first time I really saw this was in Jurassic Park. I don't know if y'all saw Jurassic Park, where they took that needle in there and they took things out. I said, that's pretty cool. I wonder if they really can do that. Let's see. Microscopic air bubbles trapped in prehistoric tree resin, which hardens into amber, provide a direct chemical snapshot of Earth's ancient atmosphere. Scientists studied these pockets to determine past oxygen concentrations, trace ancient climate variations, and understand the environments in which early life evolved. Well, what can we learn from the trap bubbles? I'm glad you asked. Ancient oxygen levels, seminal studies such as those conducted using USGS publications on Cretaceous era amber suggest that the Earth's atmosphere millions of years ago had oxygen levels as high as 35. We talked about that. Compared to 21 today. This may have supported the massive size and high metabolism of certain dinosaurs, and we just talked about the sizes. Then you have the paleoclimatology. By analyzing the gas composition inside the bubbles, researchers can reconstruct prehistoric ecosystems. Some amber deposits contain small pockets of liquid water known as anhydrous bubbles, which confirm the environment was moist when resin dripped. Now, I'm giving you all this information because I want you to see some of the stuff that the fossil record shows. Now, this is a hyperbaric chamber. Is anybody familiar with these chambers? A lot of sports, a lot of movie stars, professional athletes all over, because these are really good healing. In fact, Michael Jackson had one. They said he slept in one. A hyperbaric chamber is a sealed vessel used for hyperbaric oxygen therapy, a medical treatment that involves breathing pure oxygen in a pressurized environment, which is about 2.5 times the normal atmospheric pressure. This pressure helps the blood carry more oxygen to the body organs and tissues, aiding in healing for conditions like chronic wounds, carbon monoxide poisoning, and decompression for sickness. Rather than reading all of this, I did let me just read real quick. You can look at the slide, but let me just go this real quick. That will go a little faster versus me reading line by line. Everything in red, let me read it to you.
It says cockroach is over 18 inches long.
Oh, yeah.
Do we really want to see that?
Yeah, you will. Yeah, no. Dragonflies, 50-inch wingspan. Cockroaches, the rabbi's favorite, 15 inches long. Centipedes, 8.5 feet long. Grasshoppers, 2 feet long. Giant tarantula had a 3-foot leg span. Would you like to find that in your backyard? The cattails that you see if you go fishing along the ponds, they reach 60 feet tall. Cattail. They actually found a donkey in Texas, and its skeleton was 9 foot at the shoulders. A donkey. Buffalo horns had 12-foot spans. A giant elk had 12-foot antlers. Kangaroo reached 10 feet tall. A wombat was the size of a Mini Cooper. A goose they found stood as tall as a modern elephant and weighed half a ton. Beavers are over 8 feet long. Salamanders, 6 feet long. Sharks reached 80 feet long. Turtles were bigger than you. And they found oyster shells in Peru that reached 11.5 feet wide. And they found birds that were actually 13 feet tall. So I think the next one's going to be your pictures. Good. So this is a millipede. This millipede is 8 feet tall. As you see the man there. Could you imagine coming across a millipede that's taller than you? Now, I found this one online and I thought this showed it better than the other one. So that's what you would have found walking in the woods. I'm sure you would have brought it home as a pet. Not. Now, that's a giant sloth. If you see in the red circle, that's the modern sloth. So everybody see that. You see the giant sloth and what's in. So this is what they found. That's a pre-flood sloth claw bug, and that's your modern claw at the bottom. I want to let you look. I want you to see how big that was compared to what today is. Interesting, isn't it? This is a ammonite fossil. They're very small, but this one is huge. This is a megalodon shark's jawbone, and that's a regular shark that guy's holding up. Now, you still want to go out there to the beach and swim in the water? Now, to your left is the larva of what this fly would have been. They created this fly, but from that larva, this fly would have been over 2 inches long. Not the little tiny ones that fly. This fly would have been 2 inches long, flying in your house. The above skeleton is a pre-flood hyena versus the one on the bottom is today's present hyena. Y'all see the size difference? This is a fossil of an ant that's the size of a hummingbird. Yeah, that's it. This ant here is a flying ant whose body mass was the size of a bird wren and had a wingspan of 15 centimeters. This is an ant as big as a bird. Would y'all call pest control what? Now these are armadillos that weighed a ton. And you've seen in Texas armadillos is really tiny, but these were a ton. Now this is a giant sea scorpion that is 2.5 meters high or 98 inches, it's 8 foot. And this is how they saw it. This is a picture of it. That's a sea scorpion. Now this is a titanoboa. This is a snake that reached 46 feet long and weighed over a ton. A snake that weighed over a ton. Now the one behind me in the kind of like the bronze, that's a dragonfly with wingspans of 3 feet. The one at the bottom that's in the rock is 2.5 foot. Now if you see a little tiny one on the bottom, that's your modern day dragonfly. Does everybody see the modern day dragonfly? Y'all, which would y'all go to see it if you're fishing? The 3.5 foot one flying by you or a little wee tiny one? This is a 10-foot kangaroo. This is a spider. They drew it. They found it in the fossil record. The body of this spider is 21.25 inches long. Can you picture that in your house? I can't stand the tiny ones. If I see them, they're dead. I'm sorry. If I see a spider, snakes I can live with, kind of, but spiders, I don't know. Spiders just creep me out. You know, there's a joke talking about if you run into a spider's web, everybody becomes a kung fu expert. Ooh, I just make this. This is, I think it's called the Inosuchus, was short for Terra crocodile. This crocodile was 40 to 46 foot long and was 8.5 tons. And there's your modern crocodile in the middle. So you see how things were a little bit bigger then and you see today? And that's how they think he would have looked if you came across him in the Florida Glades.
Where would they live?
Now here's your cockroach in the fossil record that's 18 inches long. That's the second insect I hate, is cockroach. Pretty level on a spider. I don't want the tiny one in my house, much less the 18-inch one in my house. This is a beaver's skeleton that's in the museum in Minnesota, and this is a 7-foot skeleton of a beaver that they believe weighed around 200 pounds. This one was found in Canada, reconstructed, and it was 8 feet, this beaver. And this is a skeleton of a turtle that was 10 feet. The one on top is a bullfrog. It's called a Beelzebub, and it weighed 10 pounds. And then you had penguins that were 5 feet tall, all in the fossil record. This is a replica of a bird. This bird was 23 feet long, weighed 150 pounds, and that feather is 6 foot long. I didn't do the other picture, but one of them was like a pterodactyl. It's in the pterodactyl family, but it was as big as a Cessna airplane. This is a rhinoceros that stood 18 feet tall at the shoulders, 33 feet long, and weighed more than 20 tons. You see the man standing under that rhinoceros right there. Oh, you got a question?
Yeah, just quickly. We're going through all this stuff about these great animals. Where was man?
Yeah, we're gonna get to that too. It's coming.
They gonna
Yeah, he's gonna be
40 feet
last.
tall?
He's last. This is a partial skull of a rat that weighed a ton. And there's your modern rat teeth. This is a scorpion that's the size of cats found in the fossil record. So I have this. Is this a giant axe? And there's the direction. It's in New Mexico. It's in a wilderness park. And the evolution says it's the result of millions of years of rain and wind. So the question is, does it look like a giant axe? I'm not going to tell you what it is. I'm just going to let you look for yourself. Are these giant tree stumps? What do they look like to you? From the side, it looks like a mountain, but from above, it looks like a tree stump. So, in 1903, this slide you see here was 3 French surveyors went out into the Sahara Desert. Etienne Marchand, he was the mapper. He had 10 years of experience mapping French colonial territories. A geologist by the name of Paul Reinhard, had a photographer named Henry Vasseur, along with 12 local guides from the Tuareg tribe. On April 19th, 1903, one of the Tuareg guides led them to a place called, in their language, the place of the giants who fell. This tree stump, they found 47 petrified tree stumps, giant tree stumps. This was the largest. It was 138 feet across. Tree stump. Anybody find a tree stump 138? These are what you call proto-taxites. They were in the mushroom family. These were 24 feet tall and were 3 feet wide. Mushrooms. And here's the cattails I tell you about. The cattails reached 60 feet. Horsetails did 30 feet. They were very, very big. Now this is a pumpkin, and it was based on the sonic boom formula. This pumpkin reached 1,458 pounds, and I'll show you what the sonic boom is in a second. But you see that's in the Genesis book of where they produced this pumpkin using frequencies. The sonic bloom is an agricultural technology and theory developed by Dan Carlson that uses specific sound frequencies, often mimicking bird song, to stimulate plant growth. You should do that study where they kept the birds would chip, and then the plants would just open up because the frequencies by the birds opened up the plants. Interesting. It stimulated plant growth. It works by causing the stomata, the breathing pores on leaves to open wider, enhancing nutrient absorption, increasing chlorophyll production, and boosting plant drought resistance. So key aspects of the sonic bloom theory: the mechanism. High frequency sounds around 47 to 5,000 hertz are broadcast to encourage plants to open their stomata. The sound application, originally designed to mimic dawn and dusk birdsong, which often occurs at some similar frequencies, encouraging early morning nutrient intake. If you know anything about sound waves, it brought Jericho down. Sound waves brought Jericho down. Wasn't bombs, sound. The foliar application. It is typical combined with a proprietary organic foliar fertilizer spray, which can be absorbed more effectively through the open stomata. So the result, research has suggested that this method can improve overall crop health, increasing nutrient uptake, increasing growth rates, and strengthening resistance to pests. If you remember the picture I showed you for the good, God was allowing the good waves, the good frequencies to reach Earth. This is a Japanese group that took cherry tomatoes. I just want you to see the picture. So the next one is, this is close up. Dr. Ki Moriya at Keio University in Tokyo raised tomato plants under a plastic greenhouse that filtered out UV light. He pressurized CO2 for the stems of the plants. Plants breathe CO2, not oxygen. This pre-flood stimulation caused his tomato plants, because they were cherry tomatoes, to grow faster than normal. When one was 2 years old, it was 16 feet tall and produced 907 tomatoes. It ended up growing 40 feet tall and produced 15,000 tomatoes off of one plant. I just want you to think that God made Earth so perfect that we try to reduplicate it and look what we do, but look what God did on His scale. I mean, it had to be amazing, folks. I mean, simply amazing, amazing. This guy, Dr. Dan Carlson, and I read a few. He actually, if you see the normal size of lemon on one side and the lemon he produced, and then you see the cantaloupes that he produced that was bigger than soccer balls. And he did it with everything. He did it with cabbages, walnuts, cauliflower, mangoes, soybeans, cucumbers. Everything grew massive under this experiment. Now we talk about man. I researched in Safari.com about the height of Adam. I wanted to see if it ever got discussed. And actually, one in the Talmud, the Tanakh commentary, 2 more times in the Talmud, in the Holocaust, in a conversation, and they actually used Leviticus 26, 13, and 1 as their scripture that they used. So they discussed the statue and height of Adam, and they come to the conclusion he was possibly 100 cubits tall. So I've got, if a cubit ranges from 18 to 22 inches, he ranged from 150 feet tall to 183 feet tall. So I told you, if you go research Safari Library, type in height of Adam, you'll get exactly what I'm telling you. Now, whether this is true, I don't know. I'm just telling you, they had that discussion. Because, as you see, everything was bigger. Now, in the Lost World Museum, they took a man who was 25 feet tall, and they tried to replicate what his hand size would have been like at 25 feet. You see the man hand on one side, and you see what the 25-foot man's hand would have looked like. Pretty big, don't you think? I think so too. These are actual skeletons that have been found. I'm only going to do a couple because I'm not really worried about the one that's 8 foot tall. But the one to your far left, they found 3, 2 in one location. I'll read where they are because you can't really see it. The first one is 36 feet tall. There were 2 found at Carthagena, which is modern day Tunisia, and that's Africa. And then the third one came with an earthquake, and it was part of a Roman province of Mosea Inferior, and that existed around 63, 68 AD, so we've had around 3. Or the 25-foot skeleton was found in France near a castle in Chaumont. The 23-foot skeleton was found in France as well, near a river in Buoyancy along the Rhone River. And then the 1906 skeleton was found in Switzerland. And so you got Goliath, which is the 10-6 one, and then you have the Caesar. The Caesar actually was 8 feet tall, 6 inches. One of the Caesars was 8 feet. And then you had the 15-foot was found in Turkey. And then you have Og, who they believe was 12 foot or so. Now, giant skeletons in a newspaper database. So I didn't do all the Excel files because it was too big. But what I did do was I went through it and I pulled 2. If you look, I don't know if you can see it, but you got some that's 15 feet, 12, 10 feet, 9 feet, giant size. But these 2 I pulled out, the one found in Mexico was 32 feet, 10 inches long. And it was in the Harrisburg Telegraph in 2014. And then you had the one in India was in the news, and it was 2014, and it was 31 feet, 6 inches tall. And I'm going in with this. Because I actually have one on the giants alone, but it's too long for you. It's about an hour and a half. Because there are tons of newspaper articles all over the globe. Indians passed down how they would fight the red-haired giants. Several, the Comanches, the Cherokees, they would tell tales of a giant running down the prairie and grab a buffalo and keep on running. Tons of Indians have those in their legends. So I think that's interesting. But the reason I'm saying this is because we have 3 witnesses in Isaiah 65:17, 2 Peter 3:13, and Revelation 21. And all 3 said, I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth will pass away, and there is no more sea. And he's going to create a new heaven and a new earth. So is a possibility that we will go back to the original. That's up for conversation. But that's it for me.